You're watching Between the Lines with your host, Dan Gray.
Thank you for joining me this week on Between the Lines. We're going to do stuff a little bit differently this week. We're going to kind of go around the office, and then we're going to talk to an individual about disability in the workplace. I'm joined first here with Jacob. He runs, along with Colette, our new-ish sports show. It kind of took a COVID break because sports took a COVID break, but 705 Sports, and he is the sports analyst here, and he works inside the office with us here at Superior Media. Thanks for joining me, Jacob.
Hey, no problem. I'm happy to be here. I mean, can't complain about talking sports.
No, and I have enough working knowledge of it that some of our banter inside the office is outside, but bringing it on occasion, maybe once every couple of weeks, on occasion to our folks here that watch Between the Lines, might be helpful. So we're looking at coming up here the Briar. Mm-hmm. We have a Northern Ontario team right now in the Scotties, and I'm going to be up front here. I'm a bit of a curling nut, but I haven't watched much of the Scotties this year, and I think it's partially because curling just hasn't been in front of us.
It really hasn't.
Every week we've had, for winter, you would get every week you get curling with something, some players championship, something what else, but it just hasn't been there.
And I think unfortunately too, it's an issue with a lot of media coverage doesn't go to curling in general. Like TSN covers curling hardcore, but then a lot of the other sports marketing areas don't really cover curling the way it really should be covered as one of the biggest sports in Canada.
And some would say Canada's national winter sport, although that's not the truth, and by any means, and not offensive to hockey. We do a lot of that also.
We do a lot of hockey.
But we have Brad Gushu, who is, sorry, I got the wrong Gushu and the wrong Brad. We have Brad Jacobs, who is representing Northern Ontario, and he will yell at me on the phone for that one later. And he's headed off to the Bubble in the Briar. We're hoping to talk to him later this week. Anyway, so with the curling, with the Briar, and with Northern Ontario going off to the Bubble, do you think we have much of a chance?
I think we do definitely have a chance. I think it's the biggest thing is going to be to learn to adjust to bubble life, which, I mean, mind you, multiple sports have done it and teams and players have still been able to have success. But this is just another step for curling and all teams, not just Team Jacobs, to really get used to this new adjustment of being in a bubble where you can't leave, you can't go see your family, your friends, you have to just stay there and pretty much that's it. Who you're with is who you're with.
But so we look at curling's done it, NBA's done it, NHL's done it. How do you think they're learning, like curlers in general are learning from these other professionals that have taken to bubble life, and now NHL more twice now basically, because the players, as we were discussing before we were on camera here, are stuck in a bubble pretty much, essentially. Yeah. So do you think professional athletes will talk back and forth to each other about how to deal with that sort of situation?
I would imagine they would. You think about it in any profession, if someone else has experienced something that you're about to, you're going to talk to them as well to get their take on it. I also think curling as a league and like the tournaments in general are going to look at what worked and what didn't work in other bubbles versus like the World Junior Championships, the NHL, the NBA, and see the challenges that they had and see what they did to overcome them.
And being that and going on, and we're gonna take it over here to the NHL because I don't think we can call ourselves a sports segment inside of a Between the Lines show without at least talking some sort of hockey. Leafs. I know you're all about Leafs, and you pretty much bleed blue, but we won't tell too many people here because in this neck of the woods, I've learned as I bleed blue too. There's a lot of people that bleed Montreal, which is understandable based on just region, etc.
And the Red Wings as well. There's a lot of Detroit Red Wings fans in this area.
That's being Michigan's across the border, doesn't necessarily surprise me. So it takes me back to Windsor when you were a Jays fan in Windsor. And you'd go over, you would do a Detroit game with the Blue Jays there, and half the stadium was filled with
Jays fans.
With Jays fans, and it happens for Red Wings games too.
Oh, 100%.
Where it's Leafs and Red Wings. So going into the NHL season, I know you've been doing a lot on 705 Sports about the Leafs. Given it's just about halfway or just over halfway, where do you think they stand?
I think the Leafs need to be happy with where they are. They're top of the division, top in the league, one of the best scoring teams in the NHL, have one of the best power plays in the NHL. Their defense has looked a lot stronger this year because, I think Leaf fans and non-Leaf fans know the Leafs have had issues with their defensive core the past couple years. now what's really hurting the Leafs, we're running out of players with all the injuries. With Anderson, Campbell, Muzzin, Thornton, Simmons, Hyman. That's a big part of your core that is now injured. And then you have guys like Nylander and Tavares who I don't think are playing up to their full potential. It's putting a lot of pressure on Matthews and Marner.
So, given Nylander, Tavares, and we had this discussion too, moving Tavares up to the top line doesn't help the top line.
Wasn't a fan of that at all.
Keeping Tavares on the middle line isn't help. So is it Nylander the problem, or is it Tavares the problem?
Well, that's an interesting question, because if you watch the Leafs' last loss to Calgary, Nylander looked a lot better without Tavares on the line. I know he didn't score, but at least he was flying up and down the ice. You start to wonder, is Tavares a problem 5-on-5? I mean, on the power play, he's fantastic. He's been one of the reasons why our power play has been so successful. But I think Tavares is trying to play his game instead of adapting his game to his other players on the line. Where Tavares, before he was in Toronto, his whole career, he was a superstar. Now he's not. Now he's realistically secondary scoring. So I think it's an adjustment, especially this year with the way Matthews is just turning into, like, realistically the best scorer in the entire league. Tavares isn't the #1 option anymore, and I think that's why he might be struggling a bit.
So, given that this is an issue, do you think he's maybe adapting to life as a secondary scorer, but also when you bring in people like Spezza and Simmons and the others that are that guiding light, does that sort of take away your captain type tag too? Yeah, you're captain in name, but you're not necessarily captain in action?
You start to wonder that, because I'm not saying Tavares is a bad captain.
No, he's not.
Because I think he has done a pretty decent job of being the captain of the Leafs and handling the pressure of the media. Like, look, we're scrutinizing him right now. But, like, you do make a very good point. When he was named captain, all these other veterans weren't there. Now you have guys like Thornton and Spezza who they've been doing it longer than Tavares, and they're both very respected. I think Joe Thornton is one of the most respected players in the NHL. And also, too, he's putting up the points to back up his respect. Then when you have a guy like Tavares who's struggling a little bit, I think it's hard to be the captain and be struggling at the same time in a crazy market like Toronto.
And I think you're probably right. Thanks for joining me Between the Lines with Jacob. We're going to come back after this break, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Sault Thunderbirds. And thank you for joining me again. We're Between the Lines. I'm with Jacob. We're talking sports here still. It's going to be a couple extra minutes, a little longer than maybe we'd have planned on, but we're having so much fun, we're going to keep going. It's the Sault Thunderbirds. They're playing at the same time you're watching this tonight, 7 o'clock p.m. Actually, they're playing at 7 o'clock p.m. on Wednesday, and it's Thursday now. At least when we show the show. Now you know that we record in the morning on Wednesdays, which is perfectly fine. I'm with Jacob, and where do you think they're going to be at here going forward?
You know what? I think this is going to be difficult for a lot of these teams, not just the Thunderbirds, but they're playing the Blind River Beavers tonight, which both of these teams, as you said, haven't played in a couple months. I'm expecting a little bit of a sloppy game from both teams, just because they haven't had a lot of time to practice to get back into their groove. I still think the Thunderbirds can definitely win this game, even though they've won one less game than the Beavers. I wouldn't take that as like a, oh no, like I think we still have a good, solid chance. And mind you, this whole season I still think is just strictly about development, in a season where it's been chopped up, hitting's at an all-time minimum, fans are at an all-time minimum. I think this is just strictly a development season for these players.
And we're going to get down to fans. We're all sports fans, or the majority of us. I'm not going to put us all in the same boat. 705 Sports does run once a week. What's the time frame for that?
So 705 Sports runs every Friday at 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. At 4 p.m. we are live on Facebook as well, which is awesome. And the main goal with that is just to try to give everyone the best sports coverage we can give for local sports, national sports, and when they get going, more international sports.
And with that, thank you, Jacob, for joining me this morning. We're going to carry on down the road here, but I do look forward to speaking with you on probably a bi-weekly basis about what's going on in our community when it comes to sports. And welcome back. I'm with Luke, and Luke did not know I was going to be with Luke, so this should be fun. Luke is our co-op student from Cora Collegiate. He's here helping Nicole in marketing to bring our business out into the community. Thanks for joining me today, Luke, even though it was quite short notice and you didn't know you were joining me. How are you enjoying your first, 3-4 days here with us now, almost a week?
Yeah, it's been really nice. I've been doing a lot of work with Nicole, and I even did some work with you with the fire radio.
Yeah.
I've also been helping out with everything, like just having, like being a help around the office and everything.
And what he says when he says he was talking to me about fire radio, and it gives me a little bit of an in here. When I go out and take the pictures that I'm sure most of you have seen, it's because I have a fire scanner, and it's a personal fire scanner, not given to me by the fire department, as some people have asked. But fairly regularly, they put stuff over the radio, and that's how we decide whether we're going to things or stuff. So when he says he helped me with fire radio the other night when we had that fire over on Careful, he sent me a text saying, "Did you know there was a fire?" I had, in fact, heard about it, but already being a team player, been here 3, maybe 4 days, maybe a week now. So what do you hope to gain from working in a place like this for your co-op?
I hope to gain some real-world experience in collaboration with my actual education. That's the nature of co-op, in fact. Part of it is doing work and helping out. And even working in a news station, you're actually helping out a lot with your community. That's part of what I want to do here too. But gaining an actual meaningful education out of real world experience really helps out with co-op and like learning to do work by yourself.
Probably not, given COVID, the co-op you were expecting to run into, and this is probably the first time any of us here have seen you without a mask on, because you're allowed to do that in this situation for an interview. What's life been like at a high school, having to be always careful, I guess?
Well, the good people at Cora and like the wonderful staff members there really try their best to keep everyone safe. And recently, they're on the Cora Instagram page, they actually put out a notice saying that if you had any symptoms whatsoever, you were not allowed to go to school. They're really trying to keep everyone safe so they can be in the building and get like an actual in-person education, because and they even try online. They try to help out as much and do as much work as possible to put together a meaningful education out of that. And they put in measures like all the desks are exactly 2 meters apart. They're all very spaced out. Everyone wears a mask at all times, regardless. And they have hand sanitizer at the entrances of buildings. Everyone's really well put together. It's a very well-run operation, and I credit that to the wonderful work of our principal.
And different though, eh? Like, given what happened since last March and the 14 days to flatten the curve going forward, it's not life like it was in grade 9, grade 10, etc., right? Like, the
people that are coming into grade 9 and grade 10 are really, they're experiencing a very different world than I did when I came into grade 10 and grade 9. They have to adapt to newer situations, and they have to adapt to the rules and regulations that are being put in by health organizations. And we all know it's gonna be for the greater good, and that we're all gonna come out of this like better people, because we're gonna understand, like, thinking about others when we're coming to work and school, like thinking, oh yeah, I have to put on my mask because, you know, someone in my community is probably gonna thank me for it. So it really helps make you learn a lot about thinking for other people. Yeah,
and I think given the trials and tribulations that come with COVID and all the steps that we have to take, for having first Luke, and then next week we're going to hopefully have Angie here. She's our other co-op student. Having them come in and share their knowledge and their viewpoints as younger people in our newsroom. Believe it or not, when you get up to my age and the age of some of the other people here, it's nice to have that refreshing viewpoint into the way we cover things in the community. And I think with that, Luke, we look forward to learning from you as much as you probably look forward to learning from us. And we'll be back shortly after these next messages.
Okay, you're recording now.
Thank you for joining me on Between the Lines there, Kevin. We're talking a little bit about disability, etc. So why don't we give some people a bit of a background here? What is your what have you done from a perspective of helping for disabled people with Parliament, etc.? Because I know you and Mr. Natashak are pretty good friends down there.
Yeah, so first of all, Dan, thanks for having me. Always great to be with you, buddy. So just to give you a little bit of context, I was born with what's called spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy. It just simply means that I don't have enough oxygen in my legs to walk normally, and it affects things such as my muscle memory, muscle movement, and muscle dexterity. Now, to answer your question, Taraz Natashak and I are good friends. We worked together back in 2014 on a press conference that allowed for the Ontario government to bring attention to the need to hire more people with disabilities to make it a more inclusive government. And after the press conference we had, the province established a commission and a council to look into that. More recently, I was the job developer and enhanced employer support facilitator at the YMCA, and I also served as the regional ambassador for something called the Discoverability Network here in Windsor, which is the province of Ontario's new online job matching portal for employers and job seekers with disabilities to get connected.
So getting back to looking at that, my friend, when it comes to hiring people with disabilities, you've always been a bit of a motivational speaker to not just myself and others out there, but what are some of the benefits that you're aware of for somebody that has a disability that goes to look for work in the workforce?
Yeah, so there are a couple of advantages on both sides. It's reduced costs for employers who hire people with disabilities because they want to prove that they can do the job. So that means they don't quit, which is good for employers because that means that their training costs are lower. It also means that they show up for work, and it also means that they can help with providing a different perspective for people with disabilities and to solve problems in the business or organization in looking at organizational challenges in a different perspective. So it's a win-win for all, and for the person with a disability, you also increase self-confidence, self-worth, and you give them a sense of responsibility and a sense of belonging. I always say, Dan, that people with disabilities have to pay taxes just the same as you and I do. So they should have a voice in our societal conversation as well.
And knowing that, my friend, given access, like there's always been a conversation about access to employment and access to a community for people with disabilities. And we know the new act is coming up where everything's going to need to be accessible in a way that you can work. What are some of the rules in amongst making a workplace accessible for people with disabilities like yourself and others?
Well, every disability is different. Obviously, you're referring to the Ontario Disabilities for Accessibility Act of 2025, and it has to be done by 2025, so we're 4 years away from doing that. But in a more broad sense, you look at access to entry from a physical perspective. Can they get into the building? Is the door wide enough? Do they have the necessary equipment to do the job correctly? And I'll tell you, Dan, that when we looked at this, when I worked at the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, we found that 80% of accommodations for people with disabilities cost less than $500. So it's really not that difficult, and it could be as simple as the raised height of a desk or assistant software, or if you have an intellectual disability, you could need more time to complete a task. And if you have a disability where you can't stand for long periods of time, you may need an adjustable desk or a different chair. So it really, when employers ask me this question, I always tell them it's easier to ask the person once they start working for you. And I always tell people with the disabilities to be as open and transparent as possible, because it's the easiest way for employers to assist you once you begin working in the workforce.
And do you see, my friend, and talking with your other people with disabilities, do you see a discrimination as much as maybe it used to be when they say, like, be upfront and honest and say, okay, so I have a disability, this is my issue. Are you seeing people still discriminate because of that?
Well, Dan, I think that you always will have that ongoing struggle to either disclose or not disclose, because there is still an ongoing stigma for employers that if I hire someone with a disability, my training costs are going to be elevated, or I'm going to have to take more time to train this person. So when I talk to employers, it's all about the power of education. And what I mean by that is you have to allow them the chance to see that if you tailor a job to their abilities and skill sets, it's a lot easier. And sometimes tailoring a job to a skill set or ability is as simple as talking to the person and seeing what sort of workplace accommodations that they need. But certainly, to answer your original question, there's an ongoing education process between both the employer, the employee, and the person advocating on behalf of that person. And I always tell people with disabilities that they're their own best self-advocate. So I always encourage people to speak up for themselves as well.
Thank you, Kevin, for joining me today. And that's it for Between the Lines this week. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we will be talking with you again next week at the same time.